Hello and welcome to the Game Mess Game Club, recorded at the end of February here for our February game, Half-Life 1. For some of us, I think Black Mesa. For some of us, the Half-Life 1 expansion packs even. It is me, Mike Minotti from the Game Mess. I've got a bunch of us here from the Game Club, which includes some of our mods and some of our podcast producers. So once again, we all braved some retro game together. Man, pretty similar to last month where we kind of played a seminal classic, kind of from the same time period. This time, though, Half-Life 1, 1998 shooter from Valve was a major milestone for the genre. I remember when this came out. It was a very, very big deal. It was really rare, almost unheard of to have this much storytelling in a shooter, especially having it organically happen within the game like this, like having NPCs just kind of talking, sort of telling the story as you go, not really having cutscenes, things like that. Really revolutionary stuff, a huge deal. And then became big on the modding scene. I never actually beat it back in the day. It actually kind of, for similar reasons as Resident Evil 1, I was a coward. And at least the first part of this game is pretty scary. So I had trouble getting too far in it. I played the mods a ton, though. I was a giant Team Fortress Classic player. And then I played Counter-Strike back when on its original release when it was just a Half-Life 1 mod. Yeah, if anybody else has any kind of experience with the game back when it came out, I think I'd be interested to hear about that. So go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, so maybe I shouldn't put this on tape, but I pirated it like a year or two after it came out. I fell off of it, weirdly enough. I thought, it was kind of right in my wheelhouse. It did blow me away, but as I got further along in the game, I just kind of lost interest. And then Half-Life 2 came out, and that's when it really clicked. And I kind of went back and retroactively played a lot of these. Although, interesting enough, did not go back and touch Half-Life 1 again until now. So this was a relatively fresh experience. Not since, probably going on 20 years have I touched this thing. So.
Yeah, it's interesting because I also love Half-Life 2 and played the heck out of that as soon as it came out. Played through it multiple times and always respected Half-Life 1 and liked it. But yeah, just never really did get around to playing through it. Also, if you can believe it, I think this is our first shooter on the Game Club. So that's something that's exciting. But man, this was just such a great time in gaming with all this kind of just crazy innovation happening. 1998 was just nuts because every major platform had an industry-defining game. PC had this, Nintendo 64 had Ocarina of Time, PlayStation 1 had Metal Gear Solid and some other things. Game Boy actually had Pokemon come out in the US in 1998. So it just felt like important things were happening all over the place. Go ahead, Sean.
So my first experience with Half-Life wasn't way back in the day when it first came out, because I would have been too young for that. But then I was sort of the next generation after that with Steam taking off and everything. So I got a Steam account relatively early on in the late 2000s. And so that's when I first played Half-Life, when, you could start getting some of these older Valve games for dirt cheap. So I did pick up Half-Life, and I did beat it all the way back in, I guess it's not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, but 2007-ish. And then my stepbrothers both really liked it growing up as well. So I was sort of around them, and they were more into the modding stuff, which became official stuff what was it, Team Fortress and Counter-Strike and all that. So I was sort of always around Half-Life. And just for context, because this I feel like doesn't come up super often in our discussions, even though I am younger, I sort of grew up a generation behind in gaming. So I did grow up on Doom and Quake and that kind of thing on my PC, because that's what my PC could run. So I definitely had, in terms of PC games, sort of the perspective, I guess you'd say, of someone who would have been playing this back in the day, because that's what I was kind of comparing it to. So I am coming in with a similar point of reference as, say, you and Randy did.
All right, cool. Shoji, I saw you off mute there for a second. Something you wanted to say?
Yeah, similar. I actually, similar to Randy, my initial experience was when this first came out, and it was with a pirated copy of the game. Back in the day, my friend was like, "Hey man, I got this great new game. Like, check it out," and gave me a copy of it. I don't know if it was due to being a cop or a pirated copy of it, but my version was bugged. So you're on the tram right in the beginning, and when the first guard comes to open your door, he would just drop dead every time before opening the door. And I was stuck on the tram. I could never get past that section. And because of that, I didn't actually play it until, I don't know, probably 5 years later. And I've only played through it the one time then 5 years later. So kind of going back, there was so much of this that I just did not remember or recall. So it did have this kind of relatively, fresh or a new feel to me. I feel like, because I had that initial reaction to it and not getting to experience it and then kind of putting it off to the side to begin with. I just didn't kind of have that bond with this game, even though I enjoyed it and I enjoyed a lot of the mechanics and the concepts that it introduced. I always personally had a stronger connection to like GoldenEye from back around a similar time.
Yeah, and I think I'm known for kind of crapping on GoldenEye, and part of it is because this didn't come out that much later than it. Really, even before this, we had stuff like Quake and whatnot. So I was just kind of a spoiled gamer who already had a pretty decent PC. You know what, Shoji? You got to play maybe my favorite part of the game, anyways. Because even as like a kid who couldn't get too far in it because I was scared, I played that tram thing a lot. I thought that was just the coolest intro for a game, especially at this time. Just really kind of setting up the mood and the atmosphere. And then even after that, you're just kind of walking around and people are just sort of talking to you. You can go into the locker room. You can look inside of Gordon's locker. You get to go inside like the little kitchen area and mess up that person's casserole. I don't know why, but like the beginning of this game is just so strong, especially for its time.
The world building and just like the story building that happens in that short amount of time is great. And yeah, definitely one of the more memorable parts. Like even the tutorial is something that I very specifically remember because that is one thing that because the very first version that I had bugged and didn't let me off the tram. I did remember I very much went back and replayed that tutorial so much. So that was a big nostalgia hit, just going through that again. And then, just that opening section, kind of the story building when you're talking to the various scientists and before all hell just breaks loose. Definitely love that part.
Yeah, and I also started up that tutorial again when I started playing because I was very nostalgic about that. I love how the tutorial explains the long jump thing too, which is a mechanic you don't really get till like practically the end of the game. Oh, by the way, also just the best computer voice in any video game ever. I'm probably nostalgic because it's also played in Team Fortress Classic a lot. That computer like, I don't know why that like sent like shivers down my spine hearing that again. That was just really tapping into some kind of part of my brain. Go ahead, Jedi.
Right. So my experience having played this, I had a strange experience because on console I was always probably a generation or two ahead of y'all being younger, but I probably was also in the same boat as say TurboSean with PC games because PC games I could only run so many advanced games on it. So I did experience Half-Life and Half-Life 2 once Steam came around and you could get it for pretty easily and for dirt cheap. And it was kind of really taken by the game up until around halfway through it where I just sort of gave up on it.
So, and it's interesting because right after that kind of intro, then like after the incident, the Resonance Cascade, the game starts up and basically back when I used to play as a kid, and for a big chunk there, it is really like a survival horror game almost more than anything else. You have very limited resources. You don't have that many weapons. It's generally kind of scary. You're kind of like going through some dark areas. You're using your flashlights. There's literal zombies pretty much. I guess I'm kind of curious, is that what people like most about this game? Because that's still what I think about when I think about Half-Life 1. Even though after that, it kind of becomes more of a traditional, just normal shooter. What do you think, Randy?
It is by far what I like most about it. I actually have quite a few negative feelings about the second half of the game, and we'll get to it, I'm sure.
Yeah, but it is kind of strange because that's what shocked me, I guess. Finally, getting much deeper into this game is how okay, so that kind of survival horror feel does kind of go to the wayside, especially once the military people start showing up and you start fighting them a lot more. And maybe as a shooter, it's fine. It definitely does feel a little bit more just like other games of its era. There's still things about that stand out. For example, just the kind of from point A to point, like you start and you go all the way to the end almost uninterrupted. There's like that one part in the middle where you're knocked out and you're dragged away. But it's kind of the thing that the recent God of War did that everybody goes on about, right? The fact that this game did that at the time was a big deal. What are you thinking, Sean?
I'm pretty much in the same boat as Randy, where I think that the intro portion that is more survival horror-y is what holds up the most about Half-Life. Because after that, like obviously, time is a weird construct and everything. So this isn't really how it worked in the timeline. But I feel like the back half of Half-Life, or maybe I should say like the middle portion at least, feels fairly generic overall. When you've played so many other shooters that are like that, it's just kind of how it ends up feeling. Like when you revisit and whatnot. But I think in the beginning, like especially at the time, a first-person survival horror adjacent game felt very unique, and I think still in a way feels fairly unique. Especially when you compare it to what was happening, because we just did Resident Evil. Take that for example. That whole game was they designed the control scheme and the camera angles and everything around the fact that it would sort of add to that tension and everything. So having an FPS on PC do that, I think it felt a little different than what other studios were doing, and I really liked it then, and I think I like it the most out of everything that's in there now.
And there are still some kind of parts in the middle that are kind of at least ambitious, but maybe overstay their welcome. There's like that large section where you're on that kind of little train thing and you're kind of getting on and getting off and pushing a lever here, pushing a lever there. There's that one part where you're actually able to kind of like or call in an airstrike so that you have to specifically damage this one part of the wall. Like the stuff like that is neat, but there also are just kind of a lot of sections that are, walk into this area and try to shoot things. What do you think, Inufe?
Yeah, so I agree. I think so. This is actually I played through Black Mesa. It was my first time outside of the Dreamcast ill-released Dreamcast version, which was the first time I played it, but never played it all the way through. So I got too scared back in the day. But I think the middle part of this game, I think I much prefer the survival horror. I think it kind of nosedives once you get past the surface tension level a little bit until it picks back up in the last 20% of the game. But I think I much prefer, like everyone else has said, the survival horror aspect of the first part, which I'm not sure if that comes through a little bit stronger on the Black Mesa version than it did on the original.
Yeah, and I didn't play the Black Mesa version. I kind of watched a lot of a long playthrough from it to just kind of see. And kind of the vibe I got was obviously like the more modern graphics, and then throwing in a lot more stuff from Half-Life 2 with some of the kind of like the puzzles definitely have more of that vibe. You have the physics stuff in there. The biggest difference it looks like between the two is Zen, and this is kind of like the last chapter of normal Half-Life 1. In Black Mesa, it's like the last third of the game. It's completely rethought out. And it actually looked pretty cool. I was kind of sort of jealous of that version of it, but because it just, it looked way more fleshed out, way more interesting. In Half-Life 1, I know a lot of people like hated it. I was relatively okay with it, but it isn't super inspired. It is definitely the part where it feels the most like, okay, this is like, this is what you almost would have expected a PC first-person shooter in 1998 to look like, is just this part. You're just kind of in this kind of ugly alien world shooting aliens. What do you think, Randy?
I actually didn't mind Zen with two exceptions. One, like riding those aliens across. I don't know if you're supposed to do that, but that's how I got over there. There's this floating island on one of the middle sections of Zen that you have to ride like the flying aliens over to get to the teleporter thing. That was as I'm doing it, I'm like, this doesn't feel like what I'm supposed to do, but maybe it is. I don't know. That was weird, and I thought the final boss was kind of a little sloppy for me. But the rest of it I thought was okay. I didn't mind it too much. I was actually relieved that I didn't have to fight soldiers anymore, because you fight them for so long. I don't necessarily want to like. I don't want to say, oh, I like this game, or oh, I dislike this game. I don't think that's very interesting. But I think looking at it from the lens of what were they going for, and did they hit it, is I think a more interesting way to look at it. And to me, what they were going for was like, in the design meetings, you can kind of see these guys say like, wouldn't it be cool if, and then they just threw out an idea. Because this game feels like game design salad to me. Like, it starts off as a survival horror game. It turns into like this like puzzly adventure, and then into just a straight action game with set pieces that, in my opinion, don't really work. And then kind of turns into like alien sci-fi shooter at the end. And it's funny to see, like, just they were throwing everything at the wall and how much works versus how much it didn't. But also how much that informed the way we kind of look at narrative games today, and how like we kind of focus on what is strong about it. Whereas back in the day, we were kind of trying to throw variety at people. It's why, like, there's the lava level, the ice level, because we're just trying to blast you with as much variety as possible.
What do you think, Jedi?
I think that's definitely true. There's a ton of variety. I think it also gets to, because they are trying to do so much at once, there are certain things that don't work. As for example, my least favorite aspect of Half-Life remains sort of a lot of the platforming and jumping around it. I just don't think that stuff really holds up all that well today, and it's the stuff I got frustrated with the most out of the game, where you're like, as we can tell, like, you have to use like quick save and quick load almost all the time when you're trying to run around and jump around from one spot to the next. And I just don't think that holds up really all that well. And then there's a lot of that in the back half of the game, particularly when you're on Zen and on the alien planet. I don't know what you guys thought about some of those elements.
Couple thoughts for me. So first off, I was a little surprised how slippery the game could feel sometimes. I don't remember just the movement kind of feel like, even just like moving forward, you kind of keep going a little bit. It's like you're on ice a lot of the time. Kind of talk about the combat. I don't know if this is true of everyone else. Was everyone else kind of safe scumming like crazy? When a game gives me a quick save and a quick load, I go ahead. I even bound quick save to Z and quick load to X, so they are right there. Yep. Randy?
I'm just curious. Is that good game design if you have to save scum that much?
I mean, you don't have to.
I guess you don't have to. It would have been a lot harder, I think. I mean, because it is one of those games. You get if the enemies get a couple of good shots at you, you take a lot of damage very fast.
Yeah, I was watching you stream it, Mike, and I saw you save scumming pretty hard. And I'm like, man, what is this guy? What is he doing? That's not how you play games. And then I found myself doing exactly that, because I would just get completely wrecked. And I'm like, man, I don't have a prayer against these guys. I don't know where they are. They seemingly just come from out of nowhere. We haven't quite figured out the part where you're supposed to introduce a concept before it can kill you. That they don't care about that. It seems like that they have military guys that are just standing in corners for some reason in some ways, just because, if someone walks in here, we want to surprise them. But there's no way that guy would just be standing next to the vending machine. There's no way.
It's like he's waiting for you. Go ahead, Turbo Sean.
I just wanted to add on to that I think this is one of those games where, if you're, just like, if you're going back and you're playing games like this, using save states, using your quick save, quick load, it's because the game design wasn't as established back then as one of the tech submissions we'll get into a little bit. This is one of those games that does have kind of the 90s jank, where especially with late 90s going into early 3D, they were still figuring some things out. And that applied to all levels of the game design, where sometimes a level, I think, to answer Jedi's question a little bit, I would argue isn't the best designed if you need to do this. Because you could have been a little more fair to the player rather than sort of just kicking them in the nards, you know what I mean?
Inufe, go ahead. But I'm also kind of curious to hear, I'm not sure if anyone else played from Black Mesa, so I'm kind of interested to hear a bit more about that side of things, but go ahead.
Sure. So I think it's probably a little less slippery because it is on Source, but I tried to play through half of it on my Steam Deck, and we've gotten very used to auto aim using a controller. There is zero auto aim. Maybe it's in the config there, but and also save scumming on the Steam Deck is a little bit harder than just doing it on there. So I kind of just play the entire thing back through on PC. But somebody at Valve loves chemical processing plants going through this because you kind of do that almost like there's three very large chunks of kind of just going through. And some of those sections, I got to say, were get tad confusing, and maybe just I'm getting old and I don't pay too much attention as I used to. But there's some where I definitely got turned around and I really had to think, especially in the first one that you get hit by.
Yeah, I do think that just from what I saw, Black Mesa looks really nice. The two things that threw me off a bit is obviously they don't have like the same voice actors for like people like the G-Man or the security guards. They're like kind of doing impersonations. It's just a little off. The music is way different. It's actually much more like movie cinematic and less kind of like that, I don't know, that heavy kind of rhythmic Half-Life feel. And I don't know if I necessarily love that, but it's fine. But even the original, I do like the way that looks again. That might be nostalgia. It's pretty good, chunky stuff. I like the look of the underground areas and the labs, especially. Some like the skyboxes look terrible. Those have aged really poorly, especially on higher resolutions now, for sure. But so there's two expansion packs. Blue Shift like introduced HD models or whatever they called them, so like they had better character models, and I even kind of prefer those less because it's just a few years better. And at that point, I may as well have the older, chunkier stuff. And did anybody else play the expansion packs? Because I did play through Opposing Forces and Blue Shift, and they're very similar. Opposing and hilariously made by Gearbox, so Randy Pitchford had his fingers all over these. Opposing Forces is the more ambitious of the two. You play as kind of one of those kind of army men coming in, so you have a lot of different weapons. It even has its own unique tutorial thing where it's kind of like a whole boot camp thing, so that's pretty neat. The cool thing there is that the story's happening adjacent to everything going on with Gordon Freeman. You'll sometimes kind of run into him. It's like shorter-ish, but still feels kind of chunky enough. Blue Shift, the second one, which was originally planned to sort of just be a bonus for the Dreamcast version of Half-Life. That has you playing as a security guard, specifically Barney, who you might know from Half-Life 2. It is like very short, just 3 hours long, much less ambitious in terms of new mechanics or new weapons. I don't even think there are any new weapons. I also kind of like that about that. It was like, it's something you could do almost in one sitting. It's just sort of pleasant. It's fun enough. I was feeling Half-Life 1 burnout by the time I did finish Blue Shift for sure, though. But I don't know if anybody else played the expansions and had any thoughts on those. I'm not seeing anyone get off mute. So if not, we did get a lot of written in stuff. So let's read some of these, and we can kind of branch off in discussions from those. Nick Turbo said, after beating the OG, Opposing Forces Blue Shift, and a third of Black Mesa, I have a bit to say. So for original Half-Life, overall, I'll say that I really enjoyed the original Half-Life. I'm also realizing that I really like the style of FPS from the late 90s to mid-2000s. The gunplay feels really good, and the setting of a research lab in the desert feels really good to run through. Parts I didn't like about the game were the platforming sections, which unfortunately took up a lot of the second half of the game. I know first-person platforming is hard for any game, but this did not feel good at all. It doesn't help that Gordon moves so fast throughout the game, which feels great when you are running gutting, but less good when you need precision in your platforming. So there were a lot of times where just before almost any jump, I would just quick save before the jump and load if I messed up. Randy, is there something you want to jump in here right now and say about the platforming?
Well, I kind of liked it, but not because of I actually have a lot of issues with the tuning of the game. Like, I feel like there are variables that just need a little bit of tweaking. Like you mentioned it, Mikey feels like he's on ice. I feel like the damage or the drop distance, the fall distance you take before you take damage is a little too punishing. I feel like I would have liked it. There are times where I feel like I fell off a box and took 50% of my damage.
Yes,
like,
the fall damage is something.
It's pretty insane. I feel like the enemies do a little bit too much damage. I don't do enough damage. I feel like there are just a few numbers off. But if we're talking about the design of the platforming, have any of you people, probably not, maybe Mike, have seen the Poseidon Adventure, the movie?
I know of it. It's too scary for Mikey. Sounds like too many people are probably getting wiped out there.
Well, yeah. So I mean, it's a boat that flips over, and
Yeah.
basically the entire movie is them trying to traverse to the top of the boat, which is, or well, I should say the bottom of the boat, which is now at the top because the boat flipped over. And the reason I bring that up is because that movie always felt like a video game to me, even though it was well before video games really did this. But it was like an adventure where they were all puzzle solving their way through the environment. And that's what this game feels like in a lot of ways to me. It doesn't feel like quote unquote levels where you see, if you walk into a Mario level, you're seeing floating platforms that make no sense. If you go into Bowser's castle, you're like, how does Bowser go to the bathroom? Because there's just spike balls everywhere and flame. It's just not a real environment. This feels like a real environment in a way, you know, like you're not jumping across predefined platforms. You're trying to find a little lip of a ledge and walk across a thing and like break this thing so you can get up here and push a box over here. It feels like you're in an impossible situation and trying to make the best of it. To me, that's why I think the platforming makes me feel a little bit more immersed, while also understanding that if the quick load was not there, I would lose my mind, because there were plenty of times where I'm like, I just sailed over where I needed to go, because you do stop on a dime in midair too, which is kind of funny. None of it feels like you want it to, but overall, I kind of enjoyed what it brought to the game.
Speaking about the quick load, quick save, or checkpoints, Nick continued. Another bothersome aspect of the game was the checkpoint system. You don't want to know how often I had a good run and then died of something dumb and had to go back a long way because I realized I had forgotten to quick save. There were other times when I quick saved there a few steps because I had only about 10 HP and was scared an enemy was going to spawn behind me and kill me instantly. This is a common thing on shooters with health packs instead of regenerating health. Yeah, you know, it's funny because we do like regenerating health, I think kind of has like grown somewhat irksome sometimes, but there is a reason why that kind of worked in a way. It made you think about just, you know, each encounter, you're kind of starting on even ground. And a lot of times here, even if I just took some damage, I would reload a save because it would feel like, oh, why would I even continue at 50 health? That's basically just, I'm one shot away from getting killed anyways. I said, overall, I really did enjoy the game, but there was still a lot of 90s jank to it. I'm excited to go play Half-Life 2 and see how they updated the formula. Half-Life 2 is probably going to feel like a... I guess that's what surprises me is a little bit. I'm surprised how, at least in my memory, it's been a little bit since I played Half-Life 2, but I'm much more familiar with that. You know, Half-Life 2 is 6 years later than this. It's 2004. And Half-Life 2 pretty much still feels like a modern shooter to me. Like, that's kind of the first modern shooter. I think Half-Life 1 was definitely the most modern shooter when it came out. Probably was the best shooter when it came out, and a lot of things, definitely in terms of just atmosphere, storytelling, you know, a lot of that stuff. But, you know, me and Jeff did that Mount Rushmore of first-person shooters not too long ago. And we were like, well, do we put Half-Life 1 or Half-Life 2? We went with Half-Life 2, and I feel kind of good about that. Thank you for following Cyberstreet. He also played Opposing Force and Blue Shift. He said, I'll quickly lump these two together and say they were fine, but nothing special. It said developing the Half-Life world, these felt like just a little excuse to give us more of the same. The expansions also seemed to reinforce the stuff I disliked about the base game and minimize the best part of it. I did find it cute that Blue Shift had you controlling the security guard that was locked out at the beginning of the base game, but overall, these were mostly forgettable. And then he also played Black Mesa for a bit, saying, having only gone through a third of it, I can't really talk about the stuff they changed, especially late game stuff, but I feel this remake does a lot of things better than the original, and a lot of things worse than the original. Let's start with the things I liked more about Black Mesa. One, the lighting and graphics are very good and give a feeling of isolation better, going through a facility that is in the middle of a calamity. Also, the platforming feels a lot better, and being able to pick things up feels a lot better than having to shuffle platforms awkwardly. Man, every time I don't know if it was just because like the way these games are running on newer hardware, but like the pull mechanic for boxes for me, that like never really worked right. The boxes would just slide across the room or something crazy. It continues. Finally, at least on the normal difficulty, I found the game less frustrating with much more healing and armor stations. The thing I don't like about Black Mesa is the feeling of the guns. Don't get me wrong, they aren't horrible, but compared to the feeling of shooting in the original, these guns feel more like BB guns in comparison. Overall, I do enjoy Black Mesa, and am impressed with how much a team of fans could do with the material. We'll definitely be finishing this remake. I don't think this remake invalidates the original, but will come down to the preference of which version you enjoy. For newer shooter fans, I would recommend Black Mesa. For the modern enhancements in the original still holds up more than you would think. That's it. Yeah, it is worth noting that, yeah, like even though Valve kind of like officially endorsed Black Mesa and all this stuff. It was a fan project, so it's really impressive on that front. Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, I mean, he touched on the way the guns feel. I didn't play Black Mesa, so I can't really compare. But the way that they feel in the original, I think feels great still to this day. They have a really good punch to them. The enemies, just the sound design, top to bottom, I think is really iconic. It's really distinct, and you could pick it out. And yeah, there's just so much different.
So good.
It's amazing. It's like it's got to be up there in the most. If you were to do Mount Rushmore of sound design, that's got to be on there, right? So, everything feels good to this day, and I think that's a huge accomplishment because this is super duper old, and a lot of games back then just felt like bleeps and bloops. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you know what I mean. Like it felt like they were there to just kind of enhance something as opposed to something that had a vision, and I feel like they had a style that they wanted to adhere to, and they totally nailed it.
Go ahead, Jedi.
So with regards to Black Mesa, I didn't play very much of it. It was a while ago that I tried it out because my overall feelings about, especially like these types of fan remakes, is I'm not overly fond of playing through them because I do kind of want the developers like original intent, right? So where if you're playing a fan remake, that is kind of its own thing entirely, and I would never assume it would just invalidate the original thing that was based off of. But it's pretty cool, yeah, and it's very cool for what it is for the fans. So I don't mind it there. I'm not overly enthused to really try that out.
Yeah. Did you want to say something, Inu?
Yeah, I guess about the guns. I mean, I kind of do agree that I kind of only use the revolver in Black Mesa because all the other guns kind of just felt very weak for the most part. So I do agree on that part. You know, I think I don't remember, but somebody at Valve said that if they were going to go back and replay it, that they would go play Black Mesa, which I found would be interesting. That's people at Valve, but I'm not sure who it was. If it was somebody I don't know how many people are still left at Valve that still made this outside of Gabe. Yeah. So it's interesting to see that comparison. But yeah, overall, I mean, I think I do agree that the guns weren't as punchy as kind of what my brain remembered Half-Life 2 for them feeling like. But I also haven't probably played Half-Life 2 in 10 plus years. But yeah, that was my feeling on the guns. So.
To be fair, I think even in normal Half-Life 1, that revolver was definitely the best gun. It was really strong. Go ahead, Beef.
Yeah, I was just going to hop in and say, as the other person who played Black Mesa, and I've played the original Half-Life like 3 times, so I've played a lot, even though, actually, that's all in like the last 5 years. I have come to it way later than everyone else, but I was going to say, weird thing about Black Mesa is just how it messes with my mind when I play with it, because I know Half-Life a lot, and I do really like it, and it's just so weird to see, like, the new graphics and all the little changes, so it's harder for me to be, like, impartial to it and say, like, is this better? Is this worse? So that's why I think Nick said, like, and makes a good point, it's really good if you've just never played Half-Life. I don't know how someone else like who just adores Half-Life like would have reacted to it. I don't actually know how much like people think about it, but yeah, it's definitely different in a lot of weird ways.
Shoji, go ahead.
Just a quick thing. I personally haven't played Black Mesa. And hopefully this is okay, like doesn't count as an issue or a plug or anything. But if you guys haven't, No Clip has a great documentary about Black Mesa and the making of it. So it's just really fascinating to kind of, experience the game, but then not having played Black Mesa, just kind of seeing the kind of behind the scenes of it, what they went through in terms of recreating it, trying to differentiate from being not just like copycats or anything like that. The whole aspect of reworking Zen and everything. Super fascinating documentary. I would definitely recommend checking it out if you guys haven't before.
The most intriguing thing I saw in Black Mesa was it kind of it has a moment at its end that mirrors the end of Half-Life 2, where you're just sort of overpowered with a gravity gun, where they overpower that one alien gun that's almost kind of like the proton pack from Ghostbusters, and you just have infinite ammo for a while. You just kind of get to go nuts with that. I thought that was pretty neat. So let's see. Jay Sherrill here says, I played Half-Life to completion back around 1999, shortly after it came out. A high school friend gave me his copy after he finished it, and I think I still have the CD around here somewhere. I remember falling in love with it back then, but never actually played through it a second time. Game Club gave me the excuse to play through it again via Black Mesa. There's a lot of nostalgia in the way, but Black Mesa was pretty astounding at how much it recreated Half-Life piece by piece. Really feel like I was playing the same game as I remembered it. Black Mesa is that pair of rose-colored glasses for me. I haven't finished it yet, but I've gone through a good chunk of Zen, and I recommend at least booting it up and jumping to that point in the game. I remember feeling very frustrated with Zen, the original Half-Life, due to the platforming, but so far I haven't seen that. The core game holds up surprisingly well today. I thought I would have got bored or frustrated, but the feeling of continuing to push forward never got old. You constantly have a feeling that this is a living, breathing world at war with itself. Half-Life was the first FPS that I know of where different enemies attack each other, and I think this went a long way building that world. The AI is impressive for the time, with Marines swarming you and lobbing grenades to flush you out from a defensive position. Half-Life also showed the world that PC first-person shooters didn't have to be dark and dingy. It went outside in the daytime. It had blue water and green radioactive goo. We saw that these games could be bright and colorful, something that seemed to have gotten forgotten around the late 2000s. Going back to quick save and quick load was also refreshing, giving me control of where I restarted and easily going back to do better in a given section. This probably reduced the difficulty quite a bit, but overall increased my enjoyment compared to modern-day shooters. It's been a long time since I played an FPS with this feature. The biggest contribution Half-Life gave us, though, I think, was that of storytelling. It proved that you could tell a story without taking control away from the player for a cutscene, and you could let the player experience it themselves. You know, we never talked about AI, and these days it's probably something kind of easy to make fun of, and you get frustrated when the people aren't following you. But the whole system where, like, hey, yeah, make the scientist follow you, make this guard follow you, and he'll help shoot you. There's different, like, enemy groups, and they might be fighting each other also. That stuff was a pretty big deal at the time, and that was a lot of new ground for these kind of games. Opposing Force even, like, tried to make it more of a mechanic, or at least the tutorial made it seem like it would be a bigger mechanic with, like, commanding squadrons of people with you. It seemed like it was a big box feature, even though the game itself didn't have a whole lot of it. Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, the AI companion stuff seemed kind of underbaked a little bit. I mean, there were times where you could get them to follow you to a very specific location to have them unlock a door for you. If you got the soldiers to follow you or the security guards to follow you, they'll fight alongside you, but they're terrible, so they just go down instantly. But it does seem like there was something there. I actually thought, oh man, that'd be kind of cool if like each one of these guys had a different function and you had to kind of protect them, but it just wasn't there. Like, I just don't think that's what this game was about. I'm surprised we have come this long, and I was actually going to say something that we got to talk about the story, man. We got to get there, because that's like the single most influential thing about this is how it integrated storytelling into a game like this.
Right, and that really was the big deal, is that, you know, the story, like, you play Doom. What the hell is the story of Doom? No one knows. You play Quake, you're not going to know what the story of Quake is, right? Here, the story is just very clearly told as you're playing. It's not bombarding you with cutscenes. Again, the closest thing that comes to that is when you're getting dragged away by those two soldiers at one point. But otherwise, it is very modern in the sense that the story is just kind of being told as you're playing through it. Characters are just sort of talking at you. You don't even have to stick around and listen to them a lot of the time. And that stuff was amazing, frankly, at the time. And it still sort of feels like the way it should be done today. Go ahead, Sean.
Doom story is about opening a portal to hell on Mars base, and by all the demons fight through, and then Quake is about like these cultists.
Listen, whippersnapper. I played those games when they were new, and I had no idea what was going on. Okay?
That sounds like a Mikey problem, not a game problem.
It was an everybody problem.
Well, then The Rock is there, and he,
Yes.
I did enjoy
The Rock is there. He's going to lay some smackdown. Carl Urban's going to fight him.
He'll tell you to enjoy your gaming.
Enjoy your gaming.
Through the portal of hell.
That's right. But we are back. Okay. Yeah, we were talking about story, everybody. Sorry about that.
Sean was trolling us.
Sean was trolling me because
as I do.
I said because I said nobody knew what the story of Doom and Quake was back when we played it. And Sean's like, "Oh, sure, you did." No, you didn't. No one knew. You knew about it later because you read a Wikipedia article about it, Sean. That's why you know the story.
I just really like Doom and Quake. Okay,
I like
leave
Doom
me
and
alone.
Quake too, but no one likes them because of their stories. People liked Half-Life.
I mean, they have a cool
like,
story because metal.
Yeah, all right. The story here's cool. G-Man is really neat. I like how you see him, what's going on there. The ending is great with him being a weirdo. I'm generally not a big fan of silent protagonists. For some reason, I love Gordon Freeman. I don't know why. I think the dude just kind of looks cool. I love the look of the HEV suit, especially his key art in Half-Life 2, where he's just sort of walking around with that crowbar. The crowbar, even. God, the thing. That's still the best standard melee weapon in one of these shooters is Gordon Freeman's crowbar. Yeah, I don't know why. There's no reason to love him so much. He's barely a character, but I love Gordon Freeman.
I think it's because of the way people talk to you. Like they treat, especially in Half-Life 2, where it's like, Gordon Freeman, and they're just really excited to see you for some reason.
Good at
like,
that voice,
oh, man.
Randy.
Oh, thank you. It's just everyone's super pumped to see you. The second you walk in there, you say, "Oh, hello, Mr. Freeman." There's the little summary thing that says who you are right as you start. I mean, you're not a character insofar that you've got like depth, but there's something there. It kind of puts you into the role really well, I thought.
Go ahead, Beef.
Mine was about the story, but I'll touch on Gordon also just real quick. I think it works a little better in this one than in 2 because like when you play Half-Life 1, like every scientist is the same 4 people, so it just kind of works to like not everyone's an individual character. It's a little weirder to me in like Half-Life 2 where it's like you have like pretty good characters and they're talking about you and they're even making jokes about how you've never talked, so it's not just so it's like even in universe the recognizing that Gordon just doesn't talk, which kind of just makes him sound like an a-hole, but I guess it works. But the one thing I was also going to mention just about the story is what I like about this is what I like about so many games like now that I love, like Dark Souls, is a lot of it is in the background. Like you said, there's no like cutscenes in this. You can just kind of walk through everything. Most of it's in the first part of the game. Yeah, like other characters was just talking, but even then, like you can see stuff like you'll see before you go into the machine and everything goes to chaos. You'll see parts are breaking. You can find like the G-Man talking to other people. So that's also something I really like about the story is that they kind of put it in the background, find more, and give you just the important stuff so you're not confused.
Go ahead, Jedi.
So a couple of things. One about Gordon Freeman, and the other one about the story. So about Gordon Freeman, he is definitely in that lineage of a silent protagonist that you are supposed to embody that character, right? It's just a sort of, in many ways, a blank slate where you just kind of fill whatever backstory you want onto that character. But they do a pretty good job of still making it feel like, yeah, well, he's always been there. I mean, he's been a long-time employee, and that works. And I think it works better. It's strange going from this to 2 because in 2 he is basically worshipped as something of a savior in Half-Life 2, even though it's not exactly clear why, other than he managed to survive things in Half-Life 2. But that's kind of more of a conversation for Half-Life 2. The story. One of the things I do really like about the story is a lot of the contextual stuff you get as you go deeper into the facility. You start getting up clues of, oh, I think there's some people, at least in this facility, that are aware of these aliens. Because there's a lot of stuff in the game that suggests that they've kind of been studying and doing experiments with these aliens, and at least some parts of it have not been fully honest about what's been going on, and maybe that contributed to the accident that ended up happening that started the game.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to, at first, you don't really know what's going on. You're doing some weird experiment. Why are aliens invading us? Oh, I don't know. And it is how you kind of find out, oh, like that was the experiment, to be clear. It went kind of wrong here, but we have gone to that world before. We are experimenting on these aliens. What we're doing is developing portal technology. Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, I kind of love that aspect of it in the sense. I mean, when you're coming in on the tram and you see like the broken stuff and you just realize how crappy this place was made, and you hear all the people complaining about it, and you like the guys are like, oh, I guess I kind of feel guilty about this. No one would care if we were down here because of based on what we're doing. Like no one likes what they're doing. It's just a job. It's just a
Right.
job that they were paid to do. And I think they're all fully aware of it, but they can't do anything about it because that's just what they're paid to do. They got to make ends meet, so on and so forth. But I really like that about it.
Let's get to Benji Bob's comments here. He was actually sending this at the airport, so happy travels to him. Yeah, said, this was my first time ever playing Half-Life 1 or 2, and just like my first playthrough of Final Fantasy 7 a couple years back, I'm shocked how well it holds up. Really love the intro and build up to the incident. Really good environmental storytelling without just doing a big cutscene. And that continued throughout the whole game, slowly unraveling this mystery. Who was involved? Who was trying to cover it up? What was the end game? The mystery is what kept me going. And I thought the climax and sort of cliffhanger into part 2 was well done. I will say, though, going from some low-ranked scientist to becoming some 10 weapon-wielding badass and savior of the planet was a hell of a roller coaster to buy into. As far as gameplay is concerned, I'm a bit of a jumpy boy, so there were plenty of head crabs or hangers that caught me off guard and made me bang my knees against the bottom of my desk. Even though I don't play horror games, I thought it added well to the eerie atmosphere they're going for, and it wasn't ever gratuitous. I want to jump in and say that as a kid, I think that is what scared me horribly, was going through a duct at some point, and a head crab just jumped at me. That scared the hell out of me. He said, gunplay was good, but I thought there were too many guns to scroll through. Yeah, this is pre-weapon wheel stuff. I really only used the revolver, shotgun, and assault rifle by the end. I didn't find the platforming to be nearly as bad as others did, though it was a tad floaty. Besides that, I really don't have any complaints, given the time period the game was made in. Excellent level design, excellent puzzles, solid enemy variety, great storytelling. I couldn't ask for much more. Go ahead, Randy.
So on the excellent level design front, I agree for the most part. There's some weird stuff in there that I kind of was. There were a lot of times where I felt like I got through not thinking that's what I was supposed to do, and there were times where there was actually one time where I straight up had to look up what to do because I had no idea. That just removed the part of my brain that could come to that logic did not exist, which was first you have to turn on the fan and get past the fan before it like pushes you off the ladder. Do you guys remember this part?
Yes, I kind of do.
Yeah, so if the timing was tight enough that I'm like, am I supposed to do this, or am I supposed to turn this fan on another way and come back or whatever? I did finally get past that, and then I wandered around forever. I'm like, well, what did that fan do? And then you have to jump into the fan and let the air lift you up. And I'm like, well, that's for how grounded this game is and how the level design, which I agree is mostly really good, kind of immersed me into this world, making it feel real. That was a little silly. That just felt like a video game. Like there was no like visible wind lines or anything pushing me up. I was just supposed to intuit that the fan was supposed to push me up. And I feel like there was a decent amount of those scenarios where I just don't feel like I got the right feedback. Mike, the only reason I figured out that you were supposed to use a turret to blow open that door is because I watched you do it, and someone told you how to do it. Because there's no way I would have figured it out.
I forgot about that. Yeah, right. I didn't know. I was like stuck there for a while. Like, what? Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. I guess. Like, there is stuff like that in like Half-Life 2, you would assume that just because that whole game is built around a physics engine. Here, you don't know exactly how things are going to interact with each other. It's the same when, I talked about how you can call in an airstrike. My first thought was, I guess I use this to fight this giant monster chasing me and to kill it. And no, you're supposed to use it to like break down a wall so you can just escape. And even then, like, I felt sometimes you had to be kind of real precise on where you want to. There are other segments that like could be janky, but did kind of work, with that giant tentacle monster thing. You had to sort of sneak past by throwing grenades to distract it. Again, in 1998, the idea that you had to use sound to mess with an alien, that was pretty new stuff. Clink said, I was looking forward to playing Half-Life for a while now. Glad this finally gave me the reason to do it. I started on the Steam Deck to see how it was, and I made it up to Blast Pit before I decided that it wasn't cutting it for me and switched to PC. It was absolutely the right call. The gameplay is much better with a mouse and keyboard. Overall, I think it holds up pretty well. The storytelling, without taking away control, is excellent. I was a fan of the enemy variety and the constantly shifting environments that keep things fresh. What I wasn't a fan of was the platforming. It felt very rough at times and made navigation quite frustrating, particularly in Zen for the final hour or two. On that topic, I see why Zen has the reputation it does. I made excellent use of quick save during those chapters, particularly in the factory level. Looking into what Black Mesa did to change things up, I'm both curious and also terrified that they made it even longer, even if they made it more interesting. Overall, I think the original holds up well as a retro experience. It is worth at least checking out, if not completing, especially to see if you like a classic FPS experience. And then Gerber, here's our last written in one. It says, okay, a few confessions. One, I played Black Mesa. Two, I haven't finished it yet. I beaten in Gone Arc, though, so I'm close. And three, turns out I'm not very good at keyboard and mouse controls. I'm guessing that this comment will get read last, and the game itself will have been discussed already, so I'm mostly focused on how good a rework Black Mesa is of the original. One of the most memorable things about aging is when you go back to revisit a piece of media you once enjoyed, even loved, and finding it has aged poorly. Song lyrics that once seemed deep and meaningful, now being cringeworthy, a comic where women are depicted in ways that defy the rules of anatomy, a laddish comedy where jokes that were once affectionately referred to as crude are now more appropriately described with words ending in ism or ick, and I don't mean holistic. With games, the ravages of time are often more visual, now alien control schemes and dialogue that in hindsight was clearly written by a programmer on their lunch break. Black Mesa is essentially a Lazarus pit for what has ended up being one of the most important games of all time, considering the position Valve now holds in gaming. My mind, it's the Half-Life I remember playing, never to completion, at various points over the years. Of course, a quick look at YouTube shows that my mind has been playing tricks on me, and that, shockingly enough, a 1998 game looks distinctly basic now. Thanks to Black Mesa, I finally reached Zen with Half-Life, and I suspect I may have beaten the game by the time this gets read. In short, Black Mesa would have been a praiseworthy reimagining if it had been crafted by Valve themselves. We take into consideration that it is a fan project gone big, then it's a stunning piece of work. Lastly, how in the blue hell did Soccer Story even get on the poll? Hey, look, I was asking for suggestions, and Soccer Story was the one that multiple people said, so Soccer Story made it in there. Then Jap basically said, no, don't vote for that, everybody. I was like, oh, okay.
You're just too much of a coward to put Super Metroid on the ballot.
Yeah, look, I really am not looking forward to that conversation with you. No, I'm really not. So yeah, I bet someday I'll go back and play Black Mesa. I think it'll be interesting. Go ahead, Inufe, because I know you're kind of our Black Mesa boy here.
Sure. So yeah, I guess one of the things that kind of just overall, I think this might be one of the first person shooters where they never really take direct control away from you, and yet still somehow tell one of the most engaging stories, I would say. I'm struggling to think of any other game where they tell a story this good where they have. And I know right after this, I tried to play Atomic Heart. In the first 25 to 30 minutes, you can't even play. The control is completely taken from you, and I was just just turned me off immediately. I was so
which is weird because that game's compared to BioShock, and BioShock is pretty Half-Life-y in that regards. BioShock understood that. So it is still weird to see modern games falter with that so much.
Yeah, and I think the thing about Black Mesa is that I think if Valve actually put this out, I think it would have had a little more polish than what it did. But I'd be interested to see if Valve would actually ever go back and revisit any of its old stuff. But it really doesn't seem like they have any interest, or they probably would have pulled a Nintendo and stopped them a long time ago.
Yeah. That's an interesting thought. I wonder if because there's this big fan remake of Half-Life 1, I wonder if it kind of put the nail in the idea of Valve ever just doing a remake themselves. Why bother now for another good while? You already have Black Mesa, and it pretty much gets the job done in very, very well anyway. So, yeah, I guess we're kind of settled there. Go ahead, Randy.
How do you guys feel about the Fallout Elder Scrolls style, just lock your camera into a face so they can talk to you way?
I think for RPGs it makes sense because you have to talk back to them, right? You have to have your dialogue options. So I kind of get it there, but I can see how it can kind of be off-putting. It certainly isn't as good for pacing, but in a game like a Fallout where the dialogue and stuff is a big part of the game, I think it's fine.
I bring it up because there were times in this game, and I do mostly appreciate the part where I'm always in control, but there were things that I missed inadvertently because I was exploring, looking for stuff, and there was a time. So the tentacle monster that you are supposed to distract with sound, I believe, a scientist tells you that clue, which I completely missed. That was not spoken to me at all. So I had to kind of just figure that out. And there's nothing stopping anyone from just like jumping on these people's heads during during the NPCs talking. It's like, I think nowadays they're just so afraid of you missing something that they kind of just take control away from you. And that's not necessarily an elegant solution. I'm just curious what you guys thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's always the risk, is that you're going to maybe miss something. But I think it's kind of worth it in the end, to have that smoother experience, to never really lose player control like that. Also, thank you, Tuck is Bitter, resubscribing with Prime for 13 months. Go ahead, Beef.
I was just gonna say this is, and when we'll wrap up, I'll talk about 2 a little more. But that's like one of the things I think they did work on too. Is at least it's been a while since I've actually played 2. I've played that even a while ago before I played 1. And I remember you, even like the still in control, you kind of always a lot of times locked into like the same room, and you can like walk around, but you're in the same. You can't like walk past dialogue scenes. So I think that's kind of what they did to fix that, which you can argue is that much better than if it was just a cutscene. But that's Valve; they don't want to take away your control.
Speaking of final thoughts, we're actually kind of getting to that point. So I would like to hear everybody's final thoughts. I also kind of want to ask you, what is your favorite first-person shooter? And, maybe is it Half-Life? How does Half-Life maybe compare to that? Because, for myself, Half-Life 2 is my favorite first-person shooter. Single player, like first-person shooter, campaign-focused anyways, is what I'm talking about. And I still love Half-Life 1. I still love seeing how it absolutely sort of leads to that. And, I don't want to say I appreciate it more than I enjoy playing it, because I still did enjoy playing it. It's not as easy to go back to as the Half-Life 2, which really kind of figured out just a lot more modern sensibilities, even though Half-Life 1 was getting so close to that, just in terms of pacing and storytelling and things like that. But yes, calling for last thoughts, everybody. Go ahead, Beef.
Yeah, I'll go ahead since no one else will.
Thank you for not being a coward.
Well, I did also was thinking about it, so I can go ahead and start. So just final thoughts. Yeah, I think it's always weird to go back like this far, thinking like this game is 25 years old at this point. It's always hard to go back to the lens, because like the best way to like get a fair comparison of this is to play the other games that came out around this time. Like I think only a year before this was Quake 2, and like we talk about like how different this is than a game where you're in a level and all you're gonna do is shoot enemies and find keys. So it's really, when you put in that context, it's a lot different than nowadays with so many games.
I think a lot of people just got to replay GoldenEye, and GoldenEye is just 1 year before this, and it's a pretty big shift in terms of a lot of things between this and GoldenEye.
And I think you may have won that argument that GoldenEye did not hold up. I'm with you on that. Yeah, so it's definitely nice. Like, it is weird how timeless, at least still, maybe in more years, 2, like, I still think 2 is pretty timeless. This, I wouldn't put in that category. But, it's still, I really do like it, and it's innovative. As for my favorite FPS, I'm still a hard defender of Halo Infinite. I still love that multiplayer. But
that was a lot of fun.
I know, hey, I still play it. We have a new season week. It'll be fun. But yeah, so hard to talk about. But if I'd actually go just for the single player, I do actually really like Doom Eternal. I know a lot of people like kind of had issues with it, and it's not as free as 2016. They like kind of do it a specific way you want to play it. But like I clicked with that, and I just replayed it recently, like I think 2 months ago. God, I was getting so into it. It just felt so badass.
Go ahead, Sean.
I only wasn't talking because that's not my favorite first-person shooter. My closing thought is, so I guess I didn't really bring it up, but I actually didn't play through the game entirely myself this time. Because I have played through it before, I have had exposure to it, and then I could just like tune into your streams to like remind myself of stuff. But the reason I didn't revisit it as a full playthrough myself, and why I also haven't been talking a lot for this discussion, I just don't have any real love for Half-Life 1. It's a solid game overall still. It's just that some of that early 3D late 90s jank and especially early-ish PC gaming jank. I don't know. To me, I didn't love it back in the day. I still don't love it today, even though it did a lot of evolutionary. I don't, revolutionary might be strong, but it definitely evolved the FPS in several ways. I think in a lot of ways it did some things that are still good to this day. It's just not as much my kind of game. And maybe to give some context to that, my favorite first-person shooter. Well, technically it's Metroid Prime, but that's against the spirit of the question, because it's first person and you're shooting. It's not first person shooter. But it would be Doom 2016, which that probably sounds like a very Sean answer. If anyone was here for the Metal Gear Rising discussion, don't mind me. I'm just clutching my Doom guy collectible pickup replica action figure when Mike talks about and my closing thought is, you guys put Half-Life 1 on the Mount Rushmore of first-person shooters. I don't know if you just misspoke there or you tripped yourself up. You did, I yelled at you in the chat the whole time and literally yelled at you afterwards because I'm like, no, it's Half-Life 2. So I'm glad you agree with me on that, Mike. That's a great way for me to
should have been. I mean, again, in terms of importance, they're both very important, but Half-Life 2 does hold up better.
Exactly.
Inufe, go ahead.
Sure. So I guess kind of closing thoughts as someone who I played through Half-Life 2. That was kind of where I kind of came on being PC gamer. And so I never really played through Half-Life 1 because I was a console person back in the day. And I still think, even going to Black Mesa, so I kind of didn't get the full amount of PC jank. I guess a lot of that was kind of smoothed over. I still think it holds up incredibly well. And they kind of just don't make shooters like this anymore. They always want to funnel you and point you somewhere. They always want, like I've talked about, they always want to take the control away from you, and I really appreciate it where it's like it's not clobbering you over the face of like your directional arrow constantly of like, go here, dummy.
It would be a looter shooter today, right? There'd be a lot of like green arrows and red arrows and like numbers going up and RPG elements.
Very big shoulder pads for my HVAC suit. The
I
suit
would like that actually.
Anyway, and so my favorite first person shooter of all time is Titanfall 2. So kind of on the Source engine. So that's kind of it felt kind of Black Mesa felt that way because it's on Source. So probably why I liked it so much.
All right, go ahead, Jedi.
So, for one, I'm still very much a Halo guy when it comes to first-person shooters. That's still my default. That's still my default series for it in general. As for Half-Life 1, I am a very split mind with it in that I do think it's still a very excellent experience as a story, as a narrative, in terms of a lot of the technology they were pushing. I do think that stuff is still very impressive. I just don't think it plays that great as an actual video game, particularly towards the back half. And I do want to be somewhat critical of that because it is a retro game. We have to recognize when it was designed for the times. But I mean, we've seen how there are still plenty of older games that do stand the test of time when it comes to some of that stuff. So I do just want to be a little bit critical of stuff. A lot of games can still work and function pretty well even today. But even beside all of that, I still think it's a pretty fun game. I think it's a good first step, and that's going to be taken to the next level with Half-Life 2.
Shoji, I think you've gone off mute for a second there. Are you ready to go?
Yeah. Sorry.
You're good.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, again, it's obviously there's going to be some things that don't hold up well in terms of graphics and stuff, but in terms of like story, the environmental storytelling, and just a lot of thinking about like the mechanics that they used all the way back then, like it holds up today. One thing that I found really interesting was right before this game club started, I had just played through and beat GoldenEye because they had released it for Xbox. So it was really fascinating playing these two things back to back. And the stuff that Half-Life does is just obviously a lot better, but I feel like I was playing through GoldenEye with these like nostalgic glasses. I'm like, overlooking all these various problems that it has. But doing that back to back just showed me like how advanced Half-Life was for the time that it came out, only releasing a year or two after GoldenEye. And that, playing this again now really makes me want to hop in and play Alex. I have VR and I've never gotten around to it. I hear people raving about it. I'm playing through this and just like, man, I really need to get in and play Alex and kind of see these thoughts and that storytelling and all this stuff kind of go to this next level within a VR environment. I think will be really interesting.
If you liked the survival horror vibes of the first bit of Half-Life 1, you'll like Half-Life Alex. It's definitely the most like pure survival horror feeling, I think, experience in the series.
I've seen some of this. Like I've watched a little bit of gameplay here and there. And that absolutely reminds me of that first section. When it kind of has that kind of scary or survival horror feeling vibe. So I'm very.
Go ahead, Randy.
All right. Well, so first I'll say my favorite shooter. Weirdly enough, it is Wolfenstein Enemy Territory. If any of you people know what that is,
I know.
Yeah, it's great. Either way, so I have to look at it through the lens of what were they going for, and in my opinion, I think they were going for a bunch of stuff. It was like, well, what if we had him emerge onto the surface, and there's a helicopter chasing him, and he has to jump into the dam, and then there's a monster down there, and he has to climb up and turn off the vents and climb through the vents and shoot the thing, and that probably didn't work as much, but there are other moments that I think do work quite well. So I think it kind of strikes somewhere in the middle where I appreciate all of their ideas that they throw against the wall and what they do well, like the environmental storytelling and the opening sections of the game. I think they knock it out of the park. I think the shooting for the most part is really good. Again, I would probably tweak some of those variables a little bit to make it feel a little bit better, but again, it's pretty old, so you can't really complain about that. And to me, it all goes down to like the sound design and the tone and one of the text comments said that the dialogue was bad, and I don't necessarily agree with that because I think
I like the dialogue still.
Yeah, I like the dialogue where it's you wheel in and it's just like, oh, it's another day at the office, you're running late, it's like, oh well, I'm sure it's fine, and then as stuff is going crazy, you hear like, oh, did you see that shot? It's just like it's just another day at the office this was just a bad day at work. And that to me is very entertaining. And it kind of goes that way all the way through the end. You hear the soldiers talk about it, and then you're presented with a literal kind of, government agent that is coming in and paying people. And that's kind of really on the nose. And I think it works for me. But overall, I think it holds up better than it doesn't, but I was not as overwhelmingly happy with it. Just, I think the way you need to save scum to kind of have a good experience. Obviously it wasn't completely 100% well designed all the way through, but either way, like I think what it does really well. And it is really hard to understate the importance of what this game brought to the table at the time.
Well said. Shoji forgot to say, but he mentioned in chat his favorite FPS is Halo Combat Evolved. So I think I'm the only one who actually had a Half-Life game as his favorite FPS with Half-Life 2, and that's okay. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. I really had a great time having an excuse to finally go and beat Half-Life 1 and play its expansions and learn a bit about Black Mesa. Thank you, everybody. We're going to find out about next month's Game Club later tonight. So if you're watching this on YouTube, we might already have figured that out. We'll be announcing that when it's ready. Thanks again for joining me, everybody here. Thank you for everyone watching live or who's watching this on YouTube. As Jeff likes to say, hello, YouTube. We'll see you next time on the Game Mess Game Club.